Hey, what's good, everybody? I'd like to welcome you guys back to the Boombox Guru channel. I'm your host, LB. So today's video, man, we're going to be talking about Kendrick Lamar's latest album, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. This album came out May the 13th of 2022. This is Kendrick's, This is his fifth studio album, actually. This is his fifth studio album. It's his first on his label, PGLang. Or his multidisciplinary creative collective called PGLang, which also acts as a label. It's his last for TDE, Dawg Entertainment, and it also was released through Aftermath Entertainment as well as Interscope Records. So, yeah, this album came out. When this album came out, man, I'll be honest with you, I didn't initially connect with it. I really didn't. I guess because at the time I was more into other things musically. There was other like stuff that I was listening to that had my focus. So I do remember when I first listened to it when it dropped, I said, okay, this is a good album, but I didn't really feel the need to revisit it. But thankfully, I did feel the need to go back and listen to this record recently, and I gotta say, I really enjoy this record. This has become one of my favorite Kendrick albums. Sometimes I want to say that it's his best album thus far, but even if you don't consider it his best album, you got to put it right up there with Good Kid, Mad City, and To Pimp a Butterfly. Like for me, this is in the top 3 of the best Kendrick albums, honestly. And Kendrick has a very strong discography. I mean, I made a post on Instagram about him having one of the strongest discographies in hip hop, but I can do one better than that. He has one of the strongest discographies in music, period, man. His artistry is just amazing. So Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, this is a very interesting record. For one thing, the way that this album is structured is broken up into 2 parts. The first half is the Big Stepper and the second half is Mr. Morale. So the album is set up like a therapy session, and Kendrick's wife or partner, I'm not sure. A lot of people refer to her as his wife. I don't know if they're married yet. But Whitney Alford, she's his partner, his wife, the mother of his 2 children. Her and German therapist and self-help guru Eckhart Tolle, they kind of formulate a new narrative like around this record. So the album is set up like a therapy session, like I said. Big Stepper, this is like the beginning of that session. This is Kendrick making an attempt to confront the issues that are plaguing him. And Mr. Morale signifies the growth in him, like confronting these issues and in a lot of sense overcoming them. And there's this huge recurring theme in this album about generational trauma and generational curses. And I think the whole gist of this album is Kendrick trying to confront all these past traumatic issues that has probably plagued his relationship with his wife and his children and other relationships. He's trying to confront them and overcome them so he can break that curse. So that's it from, at least that's what I take from it in a gist. But let's get into a few of the songs on here that I consider to be my favorites, and I'll tell you, it's dang near a majority of the album. So the first highlight for me on here was Die Hard, which features Blast and Amanda Reifer. I hope I pronounced her last name right. So one thing that stood out to me about this track was I liked the very up-tempo kind of pop kind of beat. It's very catchy, it's very danceable. And I liked what Blast and Amanda did on the chorus, as well as the other contributions they made vocally throughout the track. So the way Genius, their annotation of this song is about Kendrick. This is him beginning to open up about his insecurities and his struggles. And in a lot of ways, this track kind of shows him having doubts about doing that. And what I take from it is that Kendrick, he's kind of brought this past trauma that he's been dealing with, whether it be past relationships or whatever, these negative influence, he's kind of brought that baggage into his relationship with Whitney and the children, and it's affecting them negatively. So this song is him starting to open up and trying to address it, but he's having doubts about it. So he hasn't quite got there yet, but it's a first attempt. But I really dig this song. I'm surprised that it wasn't a single, or is it? No, it is a single. It was a third single released on August 9th, actually. So yeah, I'm glad I looked it up. Because yeah, that song definitely had radio appeal to it. That I mean, the whole beat and everything is just so catchy. It's very danceable. I mean, I could really hear this song being played in the club or at a party or something like that. It's definitely a good track to ride to, honestly. So my next highlight on here is actually the next track after this, which is Father Time, that features Sampha. And so this song, what I really dug about this song was I liked the kind of slow, heavy drum beat of the track, and I liked the melancholy, soulful piano that's played in the background. And I liked what Sampha contributed to the hook, as well as in the other areas of the song. I want to point out the intro of this song. It features Whitney. It features a conversation between Whitney and Kendrick. She's telling Kendrick that he really needs some therapy, and he's like, "Nah, man, real nigga don't need no therapy. What you talking about?" And she's telling him, "Nah, you stupid." And he's like, "Nah." He's like trying to combat it, but she's telling him like, "You really need to talk to somebody." And she's telling him reach out to Eckhart Tolle. And Father Time is really about daddy issues, and daddy issues is a those are two words that are gonna come up throughout the entire song for the most part. But this is Kendrick basically opening up about daddy issues, which is surprising, because if you listen to Good Kid, Mad City, I kind of got the feel that maybe him and his father had a good relationship, which and I'm not saying that they don't. But I mean, if you listen to those interludes on Good Kid, Mad City, you can tell that his dad wasn't nobody to like play with. But I feel like they kind of had a good relationship. But that's not saying that they didn't. But even if they did, that doesn't mean that everything was always perfect. And I think he's opening up about maybe there's things that his dad may have taught him that weren't necessarily correct, and he's maybe there's things that he experienced with him that kind of were negative, and he's kind of bringing that into his family and so forth. And it also kind of, with that intro, Whitney urging him to take therapy, that also kind of brings out about the stigma behind therapy and how a lot of men don't want to go to therapy. They kind of view it as being weak or whatever, which is a stigma that I think is very detrimental, and I think that needs to be really it needs to be gotten rid of, honestly, because I've had therapy myself in the past. It wouldn't hurt for me to do it again, actually. But he's just talking about how like that, a real nigga don't need no therapy. Like he's saying like a real man don't need therapy or whatever. And honestly, we all can benefit from therapy, not just men but women. We all can, children, we all can. But he's confronting he's basically confronting like toxic masculinity and stuff of that nature. And he also talks about how there are young men whose fathers probably weren't even active in their life, who weren't around, how that correlates with gang culture. Because a lot of young men who are gang members, I've watched interviews where they talk about how they didn't know their dad, or their dad wasn't very active in their life, so they turned to the streets for that void, to fill that void, and that's how they got into the gang culture. So he makes the correlation between that. And I think it also shows how, like, even though Kendrick's dad was in his life, the relationship, probably wasn't always perfect. There was probably things that he was taught that Kendrick's grandfather might have taught his dad that weren't necessarily correct, and it's being passed down from generation to generation. And Kendrick is, in a lot of ways, he's kind of acknowledging that he's bringing that kind of generational trauma or curse to his family. So he's acknowledging that in some aspects, the way I think about it. At least that's what I took from the song, in a nutshell. But moving on to my next highlight, Rich Spirit. And there's also an interlude prior to that features Kodak Black. I think that's his first appearance on here, where he does like kind of like a spoken word kind of interlude, which I thought was really dope. Rich Spirit, though, this is another one of my favorites on here as well. The beat, I just really dig the beat. The beat's kind of like this kind of mellow, kind of that that kind of West Coast kind of the new West Coast sound, like DJ Mustard kind of sound. It kind of has that kind of vibe to it. That beat, bass heavy, kind of minimalist, but kind of atmospheric and ethereal in that manner. It's definitely a great song to ride to. But Rich Spirit, I didn't really know what this song was about. I know that Genius kind of states that this is Kendrick kind of taking a stance or standing firm against the criticism that is against him. But I also view it as him also talking about abstaining from toxic influences, negative things that could impact his mental health. Because he talks a lot about fasting on here. He talks a lot about in the hook he says rich nigga broke phone trying to keep the balance. I'm staying strong, and Genius actually points out on here where he released a letter last year, a year ago, where he said, I spend most of my days with fleeting thoughts, writing, listening, and collecting old beach cruisers. The morning rides keep me on a hill of silence. I go months without a phone. And silence is also a big thing on this record. So I think the silence kind of conveys Kendrick. He's abstaining from like social media and things of that nature for his own mental health. That's why in that 5 year gap, we really wasn't hearing much from him. We wasn't seeing much from him. He was doing that for his own mental health. Cause let's be honest, man, social media, that can be very toxic. It's very toxic. So and it can be a detriment to your health. And we've seen a lot of people where unfortunately it ended in very like fatal conclusions. You know, the toxicity that exists on social media. So that's the way I look at it. He's basically trying to distance himself from anything that's negative and that can negatively impact his mental health. That's what I took from this track. All right, so after this, man, we got We Cry Together. Now, We Cry Together, this features actress Taylor Page, who I'm not very familiar with. Maybe I've seen some things that she's done and didn't know who she was. This song is this is probably the most uncomfortable song, one of the most uncomfortable songs on the record. So this album displays a toxic relationship. Yeah, it's a toxic relationship. It's a dispute between Kendrick and Taylor, and they're just hurling all kinds of like vulgar, like very vulgar insults at each other, man. But this song is actually my favorite, even though it's uncomfortable. It's one of my favorites on here. You know why? Because if you go to the hook in the song, it's like, you know what, F you, bitch, F you, nigga, F you, bitch, no, F you. The back and forth, that I can tell that Kendrick was influenced by Poetic Justice, because the way that chorus is set up is very similar to how on the movie Poetic Justice, when Tupac and Janet Jackson, Lucky and Justice respectively, when they got into that heated, vicious argument by the mail truck when they was on the road trip, the way they was cussing each other out, the way that chorus is set up is very much like that. It is very much like that. Also, I also kind of got another influence from this song. I feel like Baby Boy was also an influence on here. I kind of feel like if you listen to the verses between Kendrick and Taylor, to me it kind of reminded me of Jody and Yvette on Baby Boy. It kind of reminded me of them. But Taylor was a very standout on here. And I looked her up, and I didn't see anywhere where she was like an artist, a music artist or anything. I just saw where she was an actress. But that's not to say that she doesn't do music on the side or stuff like that. But she did a great job on here. Kendrick did it too. Kendrick nailed it, of course. But I thought it was really. I see why he got an actress to feature on here, and why he didn't like go get another maybe female rapper or something to do this part. I understand why he got an actress, because Taylor being an actress, she really conveyed like the emotions of like the anger and the pain, all that you get in a vicious argument like this. She really did a good job in conveying that. I think one of the most interesting parts though is like towards the end of the song, where after they do all that cussing, they decide to have sex, because there's a line in the last verse where two lines where Taylor says, "Lay this pussy back on the couch," and then Kendrick responds, "Doggy style, then get you on top." And then the ending interlude of the song is they goes from F you to like F me, and back and forth. So they decide to just distract themselves from what just happened and have sex. And that's kind of similar to what Jody and Yvette did on Baby Boy. Remember that well popular scene where they got into that argument outside the apartment complex, and then the next scene they was back upstairs, in the bedroom having sex. You see what I'm saying? So that's where I think also the baby boy influence comes from. And Whitney comes back on the outro and she says, "Stop dancing, tap dancing around the conversation." Yeah, I also want to point out that Whitney pops up throughout the album telling Kendrick, mainly during the Big Stepper part of the record, she tells him to stop tap dancing around the conversations, around the topic. And you hear tap dancing. And one thing I noticed is that the tap dancing is way more aggressive. It's way more intense on the Big Stepper part of the album. But as the album moves forward, it starts to kind of scale back a bit until you don't hear it anymore. So I wanted to point that out. All right, so next highlight is Purple Hearts. That's track number 9. And this will be the last track on the Big Stepper part of the album. This features Summer Walker and Ghostface Killah. Man, when I seen Ghostface Killah was featured on here, man, I was like, whoa, man, Kendrick got Ghostface on here? This dude is truly one of the greats if he got somebody of that caliber on to do a song with, man. And now Summer Walker, I know of her, but I've never really dug into her music. This was actually my first time hearing Summer Walker, and I probably heard her before but didn't know who it was. But I thought she was great. I thought she was great on here. The way she did the hook, the way her and Kendrick did that one verse together, I thought she really laced the track. And it actually makes me want to go check out her solo stuff, her catalog more. I really liked it, the heavy drum beat and the lush production behind it. Ghostface, of course, he killed this track, man. I will say, though, that I almost didn't recognize his voice, though. I almost didn't recognize his voice. Because, Ghostface is older now. He's in his early 50s, so his voice has changed. So when he first came on, I was like, is that Ghostface? And then after a few bars in, I was like, yeah, I got it. Yeah, that's him. But this song is connected to the previous track, We Cry Together. So this song is supposed to be about like the healing process after having that vicious argument. This is the healing process. So you can kind of say that even though that this is the last song of the Big Stepper part, which the Big Stepper part of the album is Kendrick working through his trauma. He hasn't confronted it yet, but he's going through these sessions working through it. You can kind of look at it as this is like the beginning of him starting to make a breakthrough. He hasn't gotten there yet, but it's starting to get there, because this song is supposed to represent like that healing process or whatever. So next track, and I'm just going through my favorites, but majority of the album is like my favorite. But Count Me Out, this is track number 10, and this is the first song on the Morale part. So Count Me Out, what Genius said about this song is that it's supposed to be about a relationship, something. It's supposed to be about a person that played an important part in Kendrick's life once upon a time that he always wants to prove wrong. We don't know who it is, but it's somebody that was important in his life that he has always wanted to prove wrong. I guess this person kind of was maybe negative towards him, maybe they underappreciated him or overlooked him or so forth, but that's what this song signifies, him like calling that person out. But by the end of the song, he kind of realizes that that's not really important anymore, that this person is no longer really in his life, so it really doesn't matter anymore, and that he's much better without them being there, because without them there, they bring out, basically he realized he's too good for this person, and that leaving that relationship where it's at, it brings out more joy in him, basically. So I guess he's kind of just, this is him again, just leaving that negativity behind him and moving forward. This is him confronting an issue that was probably plaguing him in his life. But what I like about the song, my favorite part of the song is actually the beginning, like the first verse. And this is like where you have like a minimal, like melancholy piano, and there's no drums yet. The beat hasn't dropped in yet, but Kendrick's rhyming, and you have this choral like vocal arrangement in the background. Man, I think they're saying, "Am I tripping and falling?" I don't know. If you just go listen to that song, you'll know what I'm talking about. But that's my favorite part of the song, when Kendrick's rapping over that part. I mean, when the beat drops in and everything comes and he goes in, that's cool too. But my favorite part is that the more like kind of ambient, kind of abstract part of that song. And there's also another therapy session that comes in, with Eckhart Tolle and Whitney, and Whitney even mentions that session 10 breakthrough. So this is the breakthrough for Kendrick. So he's starting to get there. All right, so next, my next favorite is Silent Hill. Yeah, Silent Hill. That song that features Kodak Black wasn't his first appearance. His first appearance was on the Rich interlude, which I thought he did a good job on. Kodak Black's contribution to this album was met with a lot of it was met with some controversy because there's been some things surrounding him that aren't too great. So people were a little bit upset about that. But I thought his performance on here was really cool. I like this is like a mellow melodic trap beat. A very good song to ride to. One of my top favorites. I think this is one of the singles from the album as well. I really like riding to this song. I thought Kodak Black did a really good job on his verse, man. I've heard Kodak songs here and there, but this song really made me like, man, I really need to listen more to this dude. But the song is called Silent Hill, and I think it kind of has a few meanings. One, silence seems to be something very important within Kendrick. I think if you go back to the song, what was that song? Let me look it up right quick. Rich Spirit. Yeah, Rich Spirit. If you go back to Rich Spirit, Kendrick's talking about, what I got from that song was he was talking about abstaining from like social media and things. Like, Kendrick went through a 5-year absence where we didn't hear from him, or we didn't see anything from him. So I think silence and kind of like just kind of taking yourself out of some things, I think for him mentally was healthy for him. Kind of just kind of like shaking the world and just separating himself from everything that's around him. And it's also interesting that the song is titled after the famous horror game franchise called Silent Hill, where the main characters are usually trapped in like a town somewhere where they're surrounded by lots of like monsters and villains. And that could apply to Kendrick, where, in that 5-year absence where we didn't hear from him or see him, he was trying to keep himself away from maybe the industry. Maybe he looks at the industry and his life at that point. Maybe he felt he was surrounded by a bunch of people who you could consider like monsters and villains and so forth. So I think that's what this song really kind of conveys, is that it's again him conveying him trying to separate himself from the toxicity for his own mental health sake. That's what I think. But I like it. I like that mellow trap beat. Great song to ride to. Definitely one I like to pull up in the parking lot with. And in spite of the controversy surrounding Kodak Black, I thought his verse on here was really cool. Now we're gonna talk about Savior. Savior features Baby Keem and Sam Dew. Sam Dew is actually sprinkled throughout. He's sprinkled throughout all the album mostly. He does a lot of the background vocals, and I really like him. I don't know if he's got any solo material out, but I really would like to hear it. But Savior, I like this song, and when I was reading the lyrics and reading some of the annotations on Genius, I noticed how a lot of people were kind of drawing the connection, or whoever annotated this, they were drawing the connection of this song, Immortal Man, from To Pimp a Butterfly. So the intro, he says, Kendrick made you think about it, but he is not your savior. Cole made you feel empowered, but he is not your savior. Future said, get a money counter, but he's not your savior. Bron, as in LeBron James, Bron made you give his flowers, but he is not your savior. He is not your savior. So what I took from this song is that Kendrick he's basically confronting his flaws. He's accepted his position as an iconic artist, but he's also confronting his flaws. He also recognizes that he's human. He brings up J. Cole and Future. The LeBron statement, that was actually a replacement for Kanye West, as I found out. The original line was, Ye said to speak loud, but he is not your savior. And there's really no explanation given as to why he replaced it with LeBron, who we don't know. But in any case, he's talking about, especially with a lot of people, we tend to look at celebrities, especially rappers and so forth. We kind of tend to look at these celebrities like it's to be the people to lead the charge against, like, I guess, oppression and social injustice and stuff like that. But I think what a lot of times we fail to realize is that these people are human too, and that they have flaws. We can't be looking at them like they're perfect. They come up short. They're human just like any of us who may live normal lives, who aren't famous. So I think that talks about that. And it also goes back to Mortal Man. If you remember in Mortal Man, what I think part of the hook was, if shit hits the fan, are you still a fan? Saying that if I show you that I'm not perfect and that I have imperfections, are you still gonna be a fan of me? So Kendrick is kind of he's bringing that question back in the hook, which is performed by Baby Keem and Sam Dude, where he says, "Bitch, are you happy for me? Really, are you happy for me? Smile in my face, but are you happy for me? Yeah, I'm out the way. Are you happy for me?" So that's him bringing that question back. Like, if I show you that I'm not perfect, are you still gonna be a fan? Or if I show you my flaws and that I'm human, are you still gonna be a fan of me? And another thing I want to point out is in the last verse where he says, "Yeah, Tupac dead. Gotta think for yourself." You know, that's another connection to Mortal Man, because remember in Mortal Man, at the end of that song, Kendrick, he had that simulated interview with Tupac where he was asking Tupac advice and everything. But right here he's saying, like, Tupac dead, you gotta think for yourself. You know, like, you gotta you gotta start thinking for yourself. Like, Pac ain't here no more. So I thought that was interesting, man. It's like, you know, people, a lot of things that Tupac said is still relevant today, but, you know, Tupac ain't here no more. The man been gone like, what, 25, 26 years. So there's a point where you can't look up to these people. You can't look up to celebrities and so forth to solve the problems. Like, there comes a point where you kind of gotta, like, you gotta think for yourself, and you gotta kind of figure it out. You gotta figure it out. You know what I mean? So that's what I thought. That's what I dug about that song. I like Baby Keem. I like the way he did that hook. The hook is so catchy. Like, this song has actually become like one of my top favorites on here. Like, I like the way he did that hook, and I also like what he did on the Savior interlude. So that was pretty cool too. Next song I want to talk about is Auntie Diaries, man. This is another song where Kendrick really confronts other things. This song was very controversial because the song is actually about transphobia and homophobia. And in the song, Kendrick, he misgenders people. He uses the F word a few times. Well, maybe not a few times. It's in there quite a bit. So it sparked a lot of controversy and backlash. Mike Seatown of Dead End Hip Hop, because I watched the interview that they did. I watched their review, that they did of this album. And he kind of made a good point. He was saying that maybe Kendrick didn't do this song for the trans community or whatever. Maybe he did this song to kind of show how it's hard, how it's kind of hard to kind of, you know, to learn those pronouns and things like that and so forth. I think he's kind of showing how, basically, I think this song to me is more showing, it's kind of confronting transphobia and homophobia within, like, the black community and maybe hip hop too as well. I think Kendrick is drawn from his own experiences of dealing with loved ones who maybe were trans, who were homosexual and stuff of that nature. I think he's drawing from his own experiences, and he's kind of conveying that perspective of how he dealt with it at that time. So that's why you have that. That's why you have him misgendering people and maybe dropping the F word a lot, because he's trying to get you to convey what he thought at that time and the growth. Because if you really listen to the song, you start to hear the growth. You start to hear the growth where he's kind of learning and kind of understanding it from a different perspective. And he even talks about that controversial incident back in 2018 where he had two fans come up on stage to perform Mad City, and one of them was this young white lady, and she was using the N word during the performance, and Kendrick had to, like, stop her and was like, yeah, mom. It was another guy. He didn't use the N word. He, like, kind of bleeped it out and skipped it, but she, like, just said the word, And Kendrick had to stop her and was like, no, like my man over here kind of he kind of understood what you had to do, but she kept like just singing the song as it was, and I think he ended up kicking her off stage. But cause there's a song where he uses the F word, and they said, but only if you let that white girl say the N word. Because I think a lot of people within like those communities were kind of like, well, what if some white rapper was saying the N word all throughout their song? And I think this is kind of like in a lot of ways his response to that. But that's where I took this song. I think this is Kendrick kind of him tackling like transphobia and homophobia within like the black community, and what in his experiences like dealing with relatives, like his auntie is a man now, and him talking about his cousin who turned out to be who I believe will end up being trans as well. So him talking about, because at the end of the last verse, his cousin's at church and something, and he kind of stands up for his cousin against the pastor or whatever. But yeah, it's a really cool song. I mean, it's very vulnerable. It's very vulnerable. I don't know too many artists, especially within hip hop, that would do something to that nature, man. But it was dope, man. I thought it was dope for Kendrick to like kind of just show that, to to really tackle a subject, a very controversial subject like that. So and then my last highlight is Mother I Sober, track 17. And again, this is the Mr. Morale part. So at this point, Kendrick is confronting his issues, and I think Mother I Sober is one of the songs where he really confronts like the trauma and everything that he's experienced, man. But this one, it talks about like a lot of things. I think it kind of brings everything that's been discussed on the album. I think it kind of brings a lot of these things full circle. But one of the things that really tackled in this song is like sexual assault and stuff. Kendrick talks about like a relative where I guess whenever that relative was around, the other family members would come up and ask him like, yo, did this person touch you? Did they touch you? And he didn't understand as a child why they were doing that. And it ended up, and even though nothing happened with Kendrick and his relative, the fact that his family, his other family members kept constantly asking him these things, it ended up having a traumatic effect on him. And then he ends up learning later that this particular member of his family like assaulted his mother years ago when they was back in Chicago. But I think in a nutshell, this song really kind of confronts the fact that in a lot of families, there's a lot of trauma that takes place in families that's not dealt with. Whether it be sexual assault, drug addiction, violence, whatever the case. I think that's what this song is really trying to convey, that there's all these things that take place within our families, and a lot of times we don't confront it, and it gets swept under the rug, and that really doesn't help. It just makes that pain grow bigger and bigger until eventually it probably ends up coming out in negative ways, which I think is what happened to Kendrick. I think that's what happened to Kendrick because, like I said, I think the whole gist of this album is Kendrick is trying to break like this generational trauma so he can be a better person to his family, so he can be a better husband, so he can be a better father. He's trying to break it. He's trying to break that, so he's confronting this head on, and that's what this track really does. And man, he got Beth Gibbons. Beth Gibbons, she's the lead vocalist of Portishead. Portishead is one of the top tier trip hop bands. If you never heard their first album, Dummy, you need to go check it out. It's one of the greatest albums of all time. But he got Beth Gibbons on the hook. Like, Kendrick definitely done made it, man. He's getting this dude is getting all kinds of like iconic people on features and stuff, man. This dude is it. But yeah, that's what I really dug about this song. He's like tackling. He's confronting it himself. He's confronting it himself so he can be set free, man. And the ending is beautiful, man, because his daughter, Whitney, and his daughter, she tells Kendrick at the end of the song that you did it. I'm proud of you. You broke a generational curse. And then his daughter comes in and she says, "Thank you, Dad. Thank you, Daddy. Thank you, Mommy. Thank you, brother, Mr. Morale." I thought that was cool. And then Sam Dude comes back. And he sings the outro. "Before I go and fast asleep, love me for me, I bear my soul, and now we're free," which was what was the intro of the beginning of the album, so it brings the album full circle in a lot of ways. But yeah, I just thought it was cool that that's what I took for the song, that he's is him confronting all these past traumas so he can be a better person. And as a listener, it can motivate you to do the same thing, to like kind of confront these issues so you don't continue to carry that baggage with you the rest of your life and it be a detriment to present or future relationships, man. But that's what I took from this album as a whole, man. I'm sorry this was a long review, but I just had to really kind of go in depth with this record, especially with the replay value that I had on it. I was just taking so much from the record with each listen, and then if I couldn't really understand something, I would go and look it up to get a better understanding and kind of formulate my own ideas and my own opinions about it around it, man. But yeah, I really dig this record. I really think that this is one of the best hip hop albums of 2022. If I had a list of my top hip hop albums of 2022, this would definitely be number one. That's without saying. Kendrick, he continues to exceed everybody's expectations, in my opinion. You know, he has not dropped a terrible album yet. Every album he just keeps getting better, and you kind of wonder, like, dang, how is Kendrick gonna top this? That's what I'm kind of wondering. I'm wondering, how is Kendrick gonna top this album? Because this was fantastic. This was a great listen. This is a masterpiece, man. I mean, when I finished listening to this album, I feel like that I've read, like, you know that feeling you get after you've read a great book, or you've watched a great movie, or you've played a great video game. You know that kind of that satisfying feeling you get from it, like, oh man, I got through this, or whatever. You know the feeling you get. That's how I feel about this record. That's how I feel about this album, man. But Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, man, like, if it's not the best Kendrick album thus far, it's definitely one of the top 3 best albums he's done. And you know, I'm still trying to contemplate whether this is my favorite, man, because you got some classics. You know, you got Good Kid, Mad City, you got To Pimp a Butterfly. I mean, Damn was really good too, man. But I mean, Good Kid, Mad City, and To Pimp a Butterfly, whew. You know, putting it up against those records is a hard one, man. But I really enjoyed this record, and I applaud Kendrick for being courageous, for using this record as a way to tackle his own, like, flaws and shortcomings, and at the same time, I know this was therapeutic for him, but at the same time, listening to this could be therapeutic for a listener who may be going through similar, like, experiences as him. Yeah, you know, it's really motivating, man. That's what I dig so much about this album. So if you haven't listened to Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, I urge you to go check it out. And you know what? You don't even have to be a hip hop fan. If you don't even really listen to hip hop that much, I still recommend that you go check out the record, just off the concept and the theme surrounding it, because it can be very motivational, and it can be very beneficial to anybody. But really dug this album, man. Kendrick really outdid himself on this, and I'm just eager to see how he's gonna outdo himself again. I know it'll probably be a while before we get another album from him, but I'm fine with that. You know, we waited 5 years from this, and he put out one of the dopest, one of the best hip hop albums out right now. So I'm willing to wait. You know, as long as he keeps producing good material like this, I can wait. But yeah, man, that's it for this album review. Yeah, this one was a bit long, but I just had to really get to the nook and cranny of a lot of these songs and this record and really just bring it out there, man. But man, I honestly think that this is my favorite Kendrick album right now. Honestly, I think this is gonna be my favorite one. But I really enjoyed this album. I hope you guys will go and check out the album for yourselves. If you enjoyed this album review, do me a huge favor, hit that thumbs up and give me a like. That way it will give my videos more exposure and be able to get more people to come check out my channel and other videos as well. So if you can help me out, that would be greatly appreciated. Also, be sure to hit that subscribe button and tap that bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I drop new content. I want to give a huge thank you to everybody that's been subscribing to the channel, everybody that's been watching videos, showing their support. I truly appreciate it. And as always, hope everybody has a blessed day, a blessed week, and love, peace, and music. Peace out, y'all.